On a peaceful morning in a dense, isolated forest, the rays of the sun barely penetrated the canopy of the trees, creating a scene of almost mystical calm. However, this peace was abruptly interrupted by an anguished sound echoing through the forest. A deep, painful cry that did not belong to any human. John, a solitary man and former hunter, was patrolling the area as part of his new mission to protect wildlife when he heard the desperate sound. He stopped, his heart racing, and all his senses went on high alert. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Following the sound, John came upon a scene he would never forget. In front of him, a majestic gorilla was trapped in a brutal snare, fighting for its life. The sight was heartbreaking and filled anyone with fear, but it also presented an opportunity for redemption, a chance to prove that good can overcome evil. What happened next is something you need to see to believe. John was a man marked by his past. For many years he had been a renowned hunter, known for his skills and dexterity in capturing the largest and most dangerous animals in the forests. However, over time, the faces of the animals he hunted began to haunt him. Each trophy on his wall was a reminder of a life extinguished and a nature he was helping to destroy. The guilt grew inside him, fed by sleepless nights and recurring nightmares. It was then that John made a radical decision. He would stop being a hunter and become a protector of wildlife. He sold all his weapons and moved to an isolated cabin in the forest, dedicating himself to patrolling the most remote areas and protecting animals from illegal hunters' traps. Despite his new mission, John still carried a huge weight in his heart. The quest for redemption was not easy. Every day in the forest he encountered signs of destruction caused by other hunters, reminding him of his own past. He saved animals, disarmed traps, and faced dangers, but the doubt persisted. Would it be enough to make up for the years of destruction he had caused? The forest was vast, and the hunters numerous. John felt he was fighting an impossible battle, but the only thing that kept him going was the hope that one day, he might truly make a difference. Meanwhile, deep in the same forest, a majestic gorilla known as Kamba reigned over his territory. Kamba was a natural leader, protector of his family, and caretaker of the forest. His presence was imposing, and his strength unmatched. All the animals respected him, and even hunters avoided crossing his path. However, Kamba's life was not without dangers. The threat of illegal hunters was constant. They set traps and placed poison baits, all in an attempt to capture or kill these magnificent beings. Kamba was always on alert, protecting not only himself but also his family and other forest inhabitants. Every day was a struggle for survival for Kamba. He tirelessly patrolled his territory, checking for signs of intrusion and ensuring his family's safety. With each step, he felt the weight of responsibility on his powerful shoulders. Nights were especially dangerous when hunters took advantage of the darkness to set their traps. Kamba had learned to identify the signs of danger, but even he was not infallible. The risk of being caught in a trap was always real, and the gorilla knew that a single mistake could be fatal. The forest, with all its beauty and majesty, was also a battlefield where life and death were constantly at play. It was a quiet morning in the forest, the soft sound of leaves moving with the breeze almost hypnotic. John, on his usual patrol routine, walked along the old trails he knew so well. His mind wandered through dark thoughts of his past when suddenly a sharp and desperate scream cut through the air, reverberating among the trees. John stopped instantly, his senses sharpened by training and experience. He had heard many sounds in the forest, but nothing compared to this. It was a sound of pure pain and despair, and he knew he couldn't ignore it. John's heart began to beat faster as he followed the sound, moving with the agility and precision of a predator, though with very different intentions. He knew every second counted and that the creature making those cries needed urgent help. The dense vegetation made passage difficult, but John was undeterred. He crouched, ducked under low branches, and jumped over fallen logs, guided only by the anguished sound filling the air. Each step brought him closer to the source of the scream, and he could feel the adrenaline beginning to take over his body. When John finally reached the clearing where the screams were coming from, he stopped abruptly, his boots digging into the damp earth. The scene before him was heartbreaking. There, trapped in a cruel and primitive snare, was an enormous gorilla. Its eyes were filled with pain and fear, and it struggled violently, trying in vain to free itself. John could see that the snare had pierced deeply into the gorilla's flesh, and every movement only made the situation worse. Around them, the vegetation was destroyed by the animal's desperate struggle to escape. John knew he had to act quickly, but also with extreme caution. A gorilla, especially one that was injured and desperate, could be extremely dangerous. He approached slowly, keeping his hands visible and speaking in a low, calming tone, hoping not to provoke even more fear in the animal. "Hey, big friend, I'm here to help," he murmured softly. The gorilla looked at him, its dark eyes shining with a mixture of pain and curiosity. John knew this moment was crucial. He needed to gain the gorilla's trust to have any chance of saving it. Gathering all his courage, he moved a little closer, beginning to work on the snare with firm but gentle hands, determined to free the majestic creature from its agony. John knelt beside the gorilla, his trembling fingers trying to understand the complexity of the snare. The situation was critical. The snare was a combination of rusty metal and steel wires that entwined treacherously around the gorilla's robust arm. Each attempt by the animal to move only made the snare tighten more, causing screams of pain that echoed through the forest. John knew he needed to act quickly, but each passing second also required meticulous precision. He remembered his training as a hunter and the skills he had learned to track and capture animals. Now, ironically, he would have to use those same skills to save one of them. The process of freeing the gorilla proved more challenging than John had anticipated. He began working on the steel wires, each movement made with extreme caution to avoid causing more pain to the animal. The rust and mud made it difficult to see the snare's pressure points clearly. His hands, calloused by time and experience, moved with delicate precision, but the sweat dripping from his forehead indicated just how tense he was. At times, the strength needed to manipulate the metal made his muscles ache, and he had to pause to catch his breath and calm his nerves. While struggling with the snare, John couldn't help but reflect on his own insecurities. He had always prided himself on his courage and ability to face dangers in the forest, but this was a completely different challenge. The fear of failing and causing more suffering to the gorilla weighed heavily on him. And of course there was the constant fear of the animal itself. Although the gorilla was relatively calm, the potential for violence was still present. John knew that one sudden move could trigger an instinctive defensive reaction. He forced himself to take deep breaths and stay calm, repeatedly telling himself that he could do this. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, John managed to loosen the last steel wire. With extreme care, he opened the snare, freeing the gorilla's arm. The animal screamed one last time, but this time it was a sound of release. John slowly backed away, watching closely to see the gorilla's reaction. The large primate looked at him, its eyes filled with a mixture of pain and relief. In a slow motion, the gorilla began to test its freedom, moving the now free arm. John felt a lump in his throat, a wave of emotion overcoming him. He had done it. Against all odds, he had saved a life. The gorilla, instead of attacking or fleeing, remained there for a moment, staring at John as if acknowledging his effort and courage. It was a moment of deep connection between man and animal, a silent testament to the power of empathy and compassion. As John cautiously backed away, still holding his breath, the gorilla looked directly into his eyes. There was something profoundly human in that gaze, a mixture of pain, gratitude, and relief that John would never forget. The gorilla, now free from the snare, showed no aggression. Instead, it remained still, breathing heavily but with surprising calm. John watched every movement of the animal closely, trying to decipher its intentions. The fact that the gorilla did not immediately flee or attack was a clear sign that something extraordinary was happening between them. The gorilla, still showing signs of exhaustion and pain, slowly began to move towards John. Each step was careful, almost hesitant, as if the animal was evaluating how much trust it could place in this human. John, feeling a mix of amazement and admiration, remained still, allowing the gorilla to approach. He realized that the animal was observing his movements, its eyes reflecting a keen intelligence and unexpected vulnerability. This moment of approach was charged with tension, but also with a strange and powerful connection. A few meters away, the gorilla stopped and sat on the ground, still watching John with a fixed gaze. John, feeling a wave of emotions, decided to sit down as well, mimicking the gorilla's posture. They remained like that for a few minutes, in a profound silence that seemed full of nonverbal communication. John felt that in some way the gorilla was thanking him, not just for freeing it from the snare but for showing a humanity it perhaps did not expect to find. The two beings from such different worlds were sharing a moment of mutual understanding that transcended words. Time seemed to stand still as John and the gorilla continued to observe each other. Slowly, the gorilla began to show signs of trust and even curiosity. It moved closer, extending a heavy but surprisingly gentle hand towards John. The man, still amazed at what was happening, extended his own hand. When their hands touched, John felt the roughness of the gorilla's skin, a tangible reminder of the hardships it had faced. This simple but profound gesture solidified the trust between them. The gorilla then slightly backed away, still keeping its eyes on John, but now with an expression that seemed almost friendly. This moment of unexpected connection was a powerful testament to the capacity for empathy and understanding between different species, showing that true communication can occur in ways we often cannot predict or explain. The days following the rescue were filled with tension and danger. John knew that the illegal hunters who had set the snare could return at any moment. He decided not to abandon the gorilla, staying by its side as they tried to move away from the dangerous area. The forest, usually a place of peace and tranquility for John, now seemed full of invisible threats. During one patrol, they heard distant voices and laughter. A group of hunters was approaching. John and the gorilla hid among the dense vegetation, holding their breath as the hunters passed dangerously close. The tension of the moment further solidified the bond between them, as both knew they depended on each other for survival. Besides the hunters, the very nature of the forest presented constant challenges. Sudden storms, treacherous terrain, and the need to find food were daily obstacles. John used all his knowledge as a forest ranger to guide them safely. There were moments when the gorilla's brute strength proved invaluable, such as when they needed to cross a raging river or fend off smaller predators. In return, John offered his intelligence and survival skills, finding edible fruits and roots and building makeshift shelters. Their collaboration became a harmonious dance of trust and interdependence. One night, while resting in a small clearing, they were startled by the sound of heavy footsteps. John quickly woke up and realized that a group of hunters had set up camp nearby. He knew he had to act fast. Whispering to the gorilla, they moved silently through the darkness, trying to avoid any confrontation. However, luck was not on their side. One of the hunters spotted the movement and shouted, alerting the others. What followed was a frantic chase through the forest, with John and the gorilla using all their skills to evade the hunters. In a critical moment, the gorilla used its strength to knock down a tree, creating a temporary barrier that gave them time to escape. Each challenge overcome strengthened the trust between John and the gorilla. They learned to communicate non-verbally, developing a deep mutual understanding. John realized that the gorilla fully trusted him, following his instructions and even protecting him in moments of danger. In return, John felt an increasing responsibility to ensure the gorilla's safety. During a pause in their journey, John watched the gorilla play with a stick, a rare moment of tranquility that highlighted the animal's gentle nature. It was in that moment that John promised himself to do whatever it took to protect his new friend. This promise was not just a matter of duty, but an expression of the unbreakable bond they had formed amid the forest's adversities. Nights in the forest gave John plenty of time to reflect on his life. He found himself constantly revisiting memories of his past as a hunter, moments he had once tried to bury deeply. The hunts that once gave him a sense of purpose now seemed acts of ignorance and cruelty. The encounter with the gorilla had awakened in him a new awareness of the fragility and beauty of wildlife. He remembered the gorilla's eyes, full of pain and yet hope. That creature did not see him as an enemy, but as a possible salvation. This realization tormented and transformed him. He understood that redemption was not just about saving one animal, but fundamentally changing his relationship with the natural world. With each passing day, the connection between John and the gorilla grew stronger, becoming more than just a survival relationship. John began to see the forest through the gorilla's eyes, noticing the subtleties and interdependencies of wildlife. He became more attuned to the signs of nature, understanding the warnings of birds and the movements of other animals. This new perspective made him completely rethink his role in forest preservation. It was no longer enough to merely protect animals from hunters. He needed to become an active guardian of the ecosystem, promoting harmonious coexistence between humans and wildlife. While John underwent his internal transformation, the gorilla also showed remarkable signs of recovery. The physical wounds began to heal, and the animal gained strength each day. John watched with admiration as the gorilla, once weak and vulnerable, now explored the forest with renewed confidence. He found a safe haven where the gorilla could rest and feed without fear. It was a small hidden valley, full of fruit and fresh water. The gorilla, in its recovery, showed John the resilience and adaptability of nature. Each step the gorilla took was a testament to its will to live and thrive, even after the trauma. Over time, John and the gorilla developed a deep, almost spiritual bond. The gorilla seemed to understand John's journey of redemption, responding to him with a loyalty that went beyond human comprehension. There were moments when the two simply sat together in silence, sharing a connection that transcended words. John realized that through his interaction with the gorilla, he was healing his own emotional wounds. He found a new reason to continue his life, not as a hunter, but as a protector and friend of wildlife. This bond of friendship was proof that true transformation comes from understanding and compassion, not only for others but for oneself.